wrong for asking my pregnant coworker to cover up? The title sounds bad, I'll admit, but maybe the circumstances make me redeemable? I doubt that, but let's see. I have this coworker who is super pregnant and going on maternity leave soon. She usually wears long sleeve shirts with a crew neck or t-shirts around the office since her belly has become noticeable. It's not technically dress code, but we're supposed to wear more business dress, but I understand that she's pregnant and wants to be comfortable. Okay, who are you? Why do you care? Again, why do people care? Why do you care so much? A lot of these problems people create for themselves because they care when they shouldn't. None of your business. The thing is that she is a very attractive person, so the tighter casual clothing, I'll admit, has made it kind of hard not to look at her sometimes. That's a you problem. 100% a you problem. I didn't want to include this part. I know it'll get me labeled as a creep by some, but I want to be unbiased in telling this. Lately, I've started getting quite disturbed because she touches her belly a lot, which of course draws the ire. Sometimes you can see her whole stomach jolt, which I assume is the fetus kicking, and it's very off-putting. I've tried just not looking, but sometimes she comes to my desk to ask a question or drop something off, so I'm sitting and the stomach is in my face, and it seems like her belly is trying to reach out and get me with some of the movements, and it's really weird. You know that song in Lion King, The Circle of Life? That's the circle of life. Grow up. Yes, she has a human being in her belly. It's gonna move. That is not off-putting. I can't say why, but seeing it move so aggressively just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I politely asked her if she could maybe start wearing bulkier sweaters or hoodies to minimize the obviousness of her stomach movements. Oh my god. You dumbass. She seemed very put off, and another one of my coworkers, who I'm guessing she told, called me an asshole. So, am I one? Was this super over the line? I guess I feel like if it were me and my junk were twitching around, it would be an HR warning, so her body twitching around and drawing attention feels inappropriate as well. You did not just compare. You did not just make that comparison. You did not just compare your junk twitching to a life form in her belly twitching. One you can control, the other one you can't. Oh my god. Normally, women at our office also go on maternity leave much sooner, and I wonder if this is a reason why, and I don't know why she's still at the office this pregnant, so I just want to know if I'm really this huge asshole for not wanting to see this. Oh, yeah. Someone needs to create me an asshole button. You know, like the Staples? That was easy, and you just click it and go, asshole, asshole, asshole. Yeah, for sure. What?
Storytime about how my stepdad made my mom choose between him and my brothers. So a little background information, I was 13 years old and in 7th grade, and I had 2 older brothers, Josh and Alex, who were twins, and they were both 4 years older than me. Whenever I was 3, my dad left my mom for his dentist, and we never saw him again because he decided to start a whole new family with them. Now, because of that, my older brothers always felt like they had a specific role in my family, especially because the guys that my mom brought home, they would only last a week. Well, finally, my mom met this guy who's really nice, and she decided that she was going to get married to him, but he despised my older brothers. Mainly because before he moved in with us, my mom would not depend on him for anything. Anything that needed taken care of around the house, my brothers would do it. And we didn't have too much money while this guy was loaded. Like the one time my mom and this guy, who we're gonna call Jerry, got into a fight. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my stepdad made my mom choose between him or my brothers. So like I said, my mom and Jerry got into this one fight, and it's a super long story, but pretty much all it made Jerry realize was that he did not have authority over my mother, and she didn't have to depend on him for anything because my brothers would always be there for her. Now, Alex was more of the shy one. Meanwhile, Josh was super hot-headed and didn't deal with anybody's bullshit. And fast forward, my mom and Jerry move in together. That's when we realized that Jerry was super abusive. And Jerry knew that he could pick on Alex whenever he wanted because he wasn't going to do shit. And most of the time Josh wasn't home because he literally hated Jerry. The one time Alex came home and he did really bad on this one test. And Jerry was like, oh, he needs to learn discipline, blah, blah, blah. The next day, we all were sitting down for breakfast and we saw Alex come downstairs with a black eye. And that's whenever Josh flipped the fuck out. He grabbed Jerry, ripped him across the fucking table, and threatened him with a kitchen knife. And my mom called the cops, like for part 3. Part 3 about how my stepdad made my mom choose between him or my brothers. So like I said he needed to teach some discipline, so he literally beat the shit out of Alex. And we all didn't know until he came downstairs the one morning for breakfast. And that's whenever Josh flipped the hell out. He threatened Jerry with a knife. After that, my mom called the cops. I didn't really do anything but try to de-escalate the situation. But after that, Jerry called a family meeting down to the kitchen table. And he was like, I will not deal with this level of disrespect in this house. He was like, you need to choose between me or them. She was like, well, I'm not going to choose between you or my kids. And he was like, well, then you need to choose them leaving the house. They're about to be 18. They can leave and get their own place. So my mom ended up choosing Jerry because Jerry had a lot of money. And my brothers weren't really that mad about it because it got them out of the house. And my mom would send them a lot of money every month. And Jerry never knew about it. But now instead of him being abusive towards my brothers, he's way more abusive towards my mom.
Am I wrong for walking out of my 5-year-old niece's birthday party and taking her present with me? I, 24 female, my niece, 5 female, and my sister-in-law Megan, 25 female. Yesterday was my niece's birthday. My niece is my sister-in-law's firstborn. My sister-in-law is currently pregnant with her 4th child. Wait, her first one's 5 though? Dang! When I received the invitation to the party, there was a note asking everyone to not forget about the mommy when shopping for birthday gifts. That my niece's birthday was also meant to celebrate the woman who carried her for 9 months. Wait. I will be honest, I'm not Megan's biggest fan. I've always found her to be a large drama queen. So when I read that I was supposed to bring her a present to her daughter's birthday party, I was annoyed and knew I would be doing no such thing. For my niece's birthday, I made her a large wool hand-crocheted blanket and matching teddy bear. Oh, that's so cute! When it came time to open gifts, it was Megan sitting on a chair in the center of the living room with my nieces sitting on the floor next to her. Megan opened every single present, even the ones meant for my niece. It was only after she was done she would hand the open present to my niece. What is going on here? When it came time to open my present, I watched as Megan opened my gift, shoveled past the teddy bear and blanket, and proceeded to search for her gift. When Megan found no other present, she looked up and asked me if there was another present from me in the pile. I responded, no. Disappointed Megan took the blanket out of the box and proceeded to ask me questions like, where did you get such a cute blanket? And I hope you didn't break the bank with such an extravagant present. Her tone of voice came across as sincere, but the way she stared at me across the room definitely gave me a different impression. I responded to her questions by saying that I made the teddy bear and blanket myself and that it was no trouble for my little niece. Megan chuckles and asked me in front of the whole party if I had actually made the gifts. I responded, absolutely. Megan and I go back and forth in front of everyone for a minute, but Megan ends the conversation by saying I didn't actually make the gifts because I didn't collect the wool for the blanket or make the buttons on the bear myself. What is she getting at? That for something to be handmade, you have to use only your hands from the start to finish, otherwise it doesn't count. After my mother-in-law pulled me aside, she was extremely upset with me for antagonizing Megan. No one in the family likes Megan, but my in-laws play nice because when they didn't, Megan and her husband moved halfway across the country. They just recently moved back to town. After my mother-in-law thoroughly lectured me on keeping the peace, she asked me to leave the party, go buy Megan a present, and to come back when I'm ready with an apology. Instead, I left the party and took my presents with me. All day today, I've been playing telephone with my friends and relatives of Megan, all of them accusing me of ruining my niece's birthday party and telling me I'm the asshole for stealing my niece's birthday presents. My intentions for taking the present was to rewrap the gift and give it to my niece one-on-one so she could actually open a birthday present. After her mom opened the present, she put it back in the box and back on the table. She didn't actually give the gift to my niece.
Storytime about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. Growing up, I was really awkward. My parents always used to call me the ugly duckling, but my dad told me not to worry that when I would grow up, I would become beautiful. Honestly, this really stuck to my head, and I am very beautiful now. I used to have braces, acne. My hair has always been curly, but I didn't know how to treat it back then. My mom had really straight hair, so she had no idea how to do my hair either. And this was the toughest thing for me. I would show up to school with knots in my hair because I didn't even know how to brush it. Eventually, my mom did start taking better care of my hair, which really helped. I also didn't know how to dress for my body. I wore big hoodies, big t-shirts, while the other girls in my high school dressed for their body type. I honestly just had no clue. I did get bullied, but mostly by boys. I think the girls probably just felt bad for me, so I never really had problems with other girls. A group of boys would always bother me. One of them even asked me out, pretending that he wanted to go out with me. Of course I said yes because I actually believed him. He asked me to go to the movies, and when I showed up, he wasn't there. I decided to go watch the movie anyway, but the next day in school, I couldn't hear the end of it. To my face, this guy called me stupid. A few days later, I made a list of the ugliest girls. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, is not my storytime, it's me on Instagram. That's when the boys came out with the list of the ugliest girls in high school. What they did was pass around some flyers with all the names on it, and then they had people write the number 1 ugliest girl on the list. As soon as I saw my name on the list, I wanted to die. I pretended I was sick and went home. There was this one girl who actually stood up for me and the rest of the girls, and she was actually one of the prettiest girls in the entire school. She told everyone to knock it off, but nobody listened to her. Instead, the boys added her to the list as well, but there was no way that she was going to get voted number 1. I would show up every day to school that week wishing that I was dead. Finally, on Friday, they came out with the winner. And of course, everyone picked me. I was completely mortified, but I actually started laughing when I saw the list. It was like the stress from the entire week had finally accumulated, and my reaction was to just laugh. While they were all hoping that I was just gonna break down and cry, I started to laugh in their faces. The teacher asked me what was wrong and I showed her the list. She ran over to the principal's office and everything became way too dramatic for me. So I literally decided to run away from school. When I got home, I told my parents everything. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimers not my storytime instead of me on Instagram. When I got home and told my parents what happened, my dad actually started to cry. He actually did feel really bad for me. They sat me down and told me that looks weren't everything. That's when my dad told me again that I would grow out of this awkward phase. Then they decided to take me shopping to the mall. I went into this really cute clothing store that I had always wanted to go to but never had the courage to, and they actually bought me a full wardrobe. After that's when my mom took me to a salon and they actually did my hair. They gave me a whole hair care routine, which I had never even heard of before. And I even went and got some Noxzema, which actually the Noxzema really worked for my acne. So when I got back to school, I felt like a different person. But not really because I was still me. The principal had gone out of her way to make all the boys pay. But really, they only got suspension and didn't go to school for a week. The rest of high school was actually not that bad. I did look a lot better. 5 years later, I'm absolutely gorgeous. And guess what? One of the boys who bullied me actually slipped into my DMs last week. What should I say?
This is why you should never trust your friend if they tell you that their pet don't bite. Charla Nash would go over to her friend's house, Sandra, every now and then to watch over her 200-pound chimpanzee. Charla knew straight off the bat that she did not like that chimpanzee because it always scared her. There was even a time where the chimpanzee jumped on Charla's back and ripped out a chunk of her hair. Charla started crying, but her friend Sandra thought it was funny. Sandra would not be laughing at anything that chimpanzee did much longer after this day. One day, Charla gets a call from Sandra saying her chimpanzee wouldn't go back in the cage and she needed some help. Charla drove over there to help her friend, and immediately after, Sandra would have to call the police. By the time the police arrived, Charla was laying on the ground with half of her face eaten off, no jaw, her nose hanging from her face by a piece of her skin, and with both of her hands ripped off. This is what Charla looked like before her attack. Her entire face was mutilated after the attack, but since the photos are super graphic, they'll be posted on my Instagram story. Part 2 will include the unsettling phone call Sandra made to the police and how she described her friend getting eaten and ripped apart. This is going to be part 2 of why you should never trust your friend if they tell you that their pet don't bite. Sandra never imagined that after she called her friend over to help her put her 200-pound chimpanzee back in his cage, since he wouldn't go in, she would have to make a phone call to the police and report how her chimpanzee ate her friend alive. This is the audio clip. Charla actually ended up surviving. She was rushed to the hospital where they said she looked like she had gone through a meat grinder. Charla is very lucky to still be with us today. The most recent update about Charla is in her interview with Oprah that I have linked in my Instagram story. This is a story time of why I don't eat at other people's house no more. Me and my best friend, we were like 11 or 12 at the time, and we were having a sleepover at her house. We had hung out outside of school many times before. This would just be the first time I went over to her house. My mom drops me off and just lets me walk inside. When I went up to the door, my best friend answered and she was like, "Hey, can you grab a shoe?" Immediately, I could tell that the house wasn't very clean, but I knew it wasn't her fault. It's not because she asked me to grab a shoe. I could see behind her and could tell that the house was just really messy. It really did look like an episode of Hoarders, but I grabbed a shoe and I helped her look for that fly. So it was me, my bestie, and her grandma looking for this big ass bug. We got a little tired, so we sat down to eat something and her grandma made us a snack. I was a little scared to eat, not gonna lie, but I didn't want to make my best friend feel bad, so I went ahead and ate my food. Well, I was only able to eat some of it because we had left the basement door open and we saw the bug fly down there. So we stopped eating, ran down to the basement, and we saw the bug fly behind this box. We moved this box, and I swear 100 families of spiders and their ancestors started spewing out, like for part 2. This is going to be part 2 of why I don't eat at other people's house no more. Like I said, so many spiders started spewing out from behind this box. I genuinely thought that these spiders were going to eat all of us alive. It was not a fun situation. We did not run fast enough. These spiders started crawling all over us. I think I saw a lighter somewhere and considered setting myself on fire. I want you guys to imagine like my whole entire body covered up with spiders. That's what it felt like, but there was only like 5 or 6 on me. The grandma gets a blanket and starts whipping us with it. She's like trying to dust the spiders off. I see my best friend start stripping. I was a little about that, but I was like, fuck it. Anything to get these spiders off. Once we felt like we were good, we ran upstairs. My best friend started crying to me and apologizing and saying how much she hates her life and how she's so embarrassed. But I told her that all is good and this doesn't change the way that I see her at all. We have our little moment and then we sit down to eat again. And you know, I'm going in on my little SpaghettiOs. But all of a sudden, it starts getting crunchy. I ignore it and I get down to the bottom of the bowl. When I look down, there is a half-eaten spider in the bottom of the bowl, like for part 3. This is going to be part 3 of why I don't eat at other people's house anymore. So like I said, I was munching and grunching on some SpaghettiOs. It's getting crunchy and I'm like, what's this crunch? Where's all this crunch coming from? I was like, bruh, it's probably some expired SpaghettiOs, but let me finish this bowl so my friend don't feel bad. When I got to the end and there was only some soup left, I saw a half-eaten spider. The same spiders that we had seen downstairs. My body it started vibrating. I was shaking. I seized out. I think I passed out. This was not a good situation. I did have a phobia of spiders. I told my best friend, listen, babes, I love you. You know I love you. But this cannot go on no longer. I'm gonna have to go home. I felt like such a terrible friend, but I did call my mom and she came to get me and she took me home. I told her what happened and she was upset with my friend's grandma. From then on, we only had sleepovers at my house. And ever since my family found out about her living situation, we would go over there sometimes to help them clean. We would bring food and games. I'm grown now, but me and this girl ended up falling out because of some drama. This is a story time about the time I dated the school shooter. This might be a long story, so please bear with me. Before you form any opinions on anyone in the story, please wait all the way until the end. Trust me, you're gonna want to listen to this story time. There was this boy who went to my school and he was really shy and he got bullied a lot. He got bullied a lot because he was a lot more feminine than other guys. And I'm just the type of person to give people the benefit of the doubt, so I went ahead and started talking to him more to see the type of person that he actually was. He didn't sit with anybody during lunch, so one day I went up to him and I sat down right next to him and I started talking to him. Immediately, I loved this boy, everything about him. He was extremely sweet and considerate and understanding, and I knew that if other people took the time to get to know him, they would like him too. So we exchanged numbers and we started to FaceTime a lot. As we started to FaceTime more, I started to notice things that were a little off about him. Every single conversation that we had, he would always have to bring up about how much he hated this one boy in his tech class and how he would shoot up the school just to get rid of him, like for part 2. This is part 2 about how I dated the school shooter. So let me backtrack a little bit from part 1. We exchanged numbers, we started to make plans to hang out outside of school, and we just started talking more outside of school, and eventually we started dating. He never really talked about this guy in his tech class until we started dating. Keep that in mind. For some reason, that guy in his tech class really bothered him. Like I said, he started talking about how he would shoot up the school just to get rid of this guy. At first, I thought it was just a joke and he was just saying that, until he kept saying it. He started being so serious about it and he started planning it out and exactly what he would do when he did it. That started to scare me, and so I decided that I was going to record one of these conversations, just in case. During that conversation, he said he planned to shoot up the school the next day. He said, in these exact words, fuck it, you know what? I'm just going to do it tomorrow. Then he tells me to not come to school the next day. That's when I know that he was actually being serious. Immediately after, I started writing up an email to the school like for part 3. This is going to be part 3 of the time I dated the school shooter. So his exact plan was to use this new gun that his dad had just recently bought. And his exact goal was to get rid of that guy in his tech class. And his tech class was in the beginning of the school day. So after I wrote that email to the school about his plan and inserted the recording that I secretly took of him admitting to it, I realized that I had sent that email at around 12:05 a.m. Most of the time, the teachers don't ever email you back unless the school day has already started. That morning, for some reason, everything in my gut was telling me I sent the email too late. They're not going to open it in time. They're not going to see it in time. My mom just thought that I was sick that day, so I told her that I was going to take a walk around the neighborhood. And I totally forgot to mention that he lived in my neighborhood. I told my mom I was going on a walk, but I was actually going to his house to tell his parents. By the time I got there, his mom told me that the dad is driving him to school. I told her his plan, let her listen to the recording. So she checked where the dad put the gun and it was not there. She called the dad to tell him to check his bag. The dad said he had already dropped him off at school and he was halfway home. His tech class was first period, like for part 4. This is going to be part 4 of the time I dated the school shooter. So let me do a little recap. So like I said, I ran to his house that morning to try to tell his parents his plan about shooting up the school, and I showed them the recording for proof. I was only able to tell the mom his plan because the dad had already taken him to school. She checked where this new gun he was planning on using was supposed to be and it wasn't there. Then when she called the dad to tell him to check their son's bag, the dad said 1, the gun should still be there because he hadn't touched it since he put it away, and 2, he had already dropped him off at school and he was halfway home. I didn't even tell my mama where I was going. I hopped in the car with my boyfriend's mom and we zoomed. The dad had taken a U-turn and he was speeding towards the school too. At this point, first period was about to start in 5 minutes. It was us against time. We were passing cars, running red lights. When we got to the school, the mom barely parked the car. The dad was already in there, I'm pretty sure. But as we were running inside, the dad was coming out with my boyfriend. This is what happened after, like for part 5. This is going to be part 5 about the time I dated the school shooter. Like I said, my boyfriend's parents and I sped to the school and got there in time to stop him from carrying out his plan of shooting the school. I'm guessing the dad told them that there was like an emergency dentist appointment or something. Once they got in the car, the dad made my boyfriend open his bag, and there was the gun. Child, the way my heart... You hear that? That's how fast my heart was beating at the time. It was so hard to believe that he actually brought that gun to school, like he was actually going to carry out that plan. But from what I've seen, he was just so sweet and just does not seem like that type of guy at all. Mind you, his family was a very respected family in our neighborhood. They were super sweet. Everybody loved them. They just knew that the son was antisocial. After all this happened, I did not tell anybody about this. Like, I'm a real bitch. I did not tell my best friends. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell nobody. Some time had passed and I hadn't talked to him. He wasn't coming to school and I was actually blocked on all socials. Even his parents blocked me. Went to his house multiple times, knocked on the door, nobody answered. Eventually someone told me that they moved, but I still had some unfinished business, like for part 6. So this is gonna be me finishing the unfinished business. Like I said, him and his family moved. They didn't tell anybody anything. They just packed their stuff and they left. Everyone in the neighborhood was so confused. But I kept my mouth shut. Like I said, I'm a real bitch. I needed to find the answers as to why. Why did he want to get rid of that tech guy so bad? Well. So I went to tech first period just to see who was all in the classroom. I didn't actually go in the classroom. I was just standing outside the classroom. Based on where my ex was saying that he sat in the room, I figured out who the tech guy was. As soon as the bell rang for first period to be over, I ran to that tech class. I stopped that guy that my boyfriend was talking about. I told him everything. And that is when he admitted to me that one day, they were hanging out, mind you, this boy is a senior, my ex was a sophomore. They hooked up, but my ex was ashamed of what he did, so he threatened to say that he was taken advantage of. That boy said, well, I'm gonna tell people the truth then if you're gonna do that. So basically, my ex was embarrassed of his sexuality. Guessing after we started dating, he started to get super ashamed of what he did. And that's why he decided to shoot up the school. This is gonna be a story time of how I almost drowned someone's baby. Y'all, I cannot sleep at night because of this. I cannot believe that I did this to someone's child. But let me go ahead and explain myself. So I was babysitting for this one rich ass family. What's so amazing about it was the fact that the parents were never home. At the same time, I was just a senior in high school. I didn't have much to do after school either. I didn't have hobbies. I didn't play a sport. So I had all the time in the world to babysit for their kid and house sit for them. This baby was only 1 year old. Since the baby was so young, I had to keep eyes on it at all times. They had this big pool area and they said that if I ever wanted to go swimming, I could, and there was a floaty for the baby. One day while I was house sitting and babysitting for them, I went in the pool and I put the baby on the floaty thing. Somehow I forgot that baby existed. I felt something in the bottom of my feet at the pool. It was like slippery, so I kicked it out the way because I thought it was a toy. And then when I turn around me, I see that the baby is not on the floaty. I look down and I see this tiny human sunk in the water, like for part 2. This is part 2 of how I almost drowned someone's baby. When this was happening, I was on my phone, so I was distracted. I looked down in the pool and I see that the baby is drowning. I don't really know how to explain the way that my heart skipped a beat at this exact moment. Like my heart was beating regularly and then all of a sudden it skipped 2 beats at a time. My ass was in my forehead. Immediately dived down into the pool, took out the baby, but the baby was suffocating. Now listen, I never did CPR, but God blessed me with those skills in that very moment. I was able to keep myself calm and did CPR on the baby and was able to get it to breathe again. I did not tell nobody shit about this. I didn't tell the parents. The baby is fine. I really should have told the parents because what if it did cause a health issue? But from what I've seen, the baby's fine. Yeah, I didn't tell them what happened, but I quit babysitting because I felt guilty. They haven't said anything about their baby dysfunctioning, so the baby is fine. Just because of this, I pulled myself out of babysitting and I'll never babysit ever again because I'm clearly not responsible enough. This is gonna be a story time while I take my makeup off about how I was the crazy ex. So my boyfriend at the time, we were on and off and he kicked me out and told me to pack my stuff and I had to be out that night. I definitely packed my stuff for sure, packed my stuff and moved it to a different closet in his house that he never opens. So I started sleeping in his car, but he kept finding me there every morning when he had to go to work. So I decided that I was going to continue sleeping in his car and I was going to wake up a little earlier before he had to go to work. And I knocked on his door and I told him that I needed to get some stuff that I forgot. I decided that I was going to take my sweet time up until the time he had to go to work so I could have the house all to myself. I slept in that house for multiple days without this man knowing. Is he ever going to find out? I don't know. Listen, Linda, I honestly did what I had to do when I do it again. Well, one day I remember him coming home and I kept hearing a girl's voice. This time when he came home, it was kind of unexpected, so I had to run under his bed. I kept hearing this girl's voice all the way from downstairs until he came upstairs. And so once he sat down on the bed, I jumped out from out that mug and I jumped on his ass. But I didn't see no girl. Apparently he was just on the phone. He dragged me out the house, told me I was crazy, said he was gonna call the cops if he saw me there again. But all is good. This was like 5 years ago. Me and this man are married now. He is now my baby daddy. And we got 3 kids. This is gonna be a story time about how my whole school went on a manhunt for one student. Why was they looking for his ass? I'm gonna get into it. Let me clarify right now that I am a victim. I do not want nobody in the comments saying, why didn't you do this? Why did you do this? It could have been me. It could have been any of us. That's why I minded my business throughout this whole thing. So I got to school a little late that day, but when I got to my class, I could tell there was a little tension in the air. I didn't know what it was, whether it was a teacher having a problem with a student or a student having a problem with another student. I just knew that the energy was off. So I'm sitting down in class minding my business per usual. The next thing I see is my teacher try to grab this one boy's phone. He immediately snatches it off his desk before she can grab it. That's when they get into this little tug of war type of thing. But the next thing you know, everybody sees this boy mollywop the teacher in the stomach. She falls and he runs out the classroom. Some kids started laughing and thought it was funny until the teacher wasn't waking up. This is when things get bad, like for part 2. This is going to be part 2 of the time my whole school went on a manhunt for one student. So like I said, this kid punched this teacher and ran out of the classroom and the teacher wasn't waking up anymore. So as you can imagine, a room full of drained high school students who just woke up a few hours ago, we were all kind of just like looking around at each other. No one thought to, I don't know, tell somebody that this shit happened. Like, were we silent? Or were we silenced? I blame the school system for making school so early because I feel like once you get to school, your cognitive functions get out the window. So I really try hard not to feel guilty about this, and I try not to blame my other classmates for not doing anything as well. And then eventually like 5 minutes pass and then we're like, okay, maybe we should check if she's awake at least. That's when one of the students get up and start to check. Well, they check and they say that she's not breathing. It obviously set something off in our brains, like this is an emergency, something needs to happen now. That's when a bunch of us ran to the office and they called the ambulance, like for part 3. This is gonna be part 3 of the time my whole school went on a manhunt for one student. So we went to the office and told them how the kid punched the teacher and the teacher wasn't waking up. Immediately, a bunch of staff ran to the class to see where the teacher was and what was going on with her. I didn't personally run to the office. When I say we, I mean my classmates. So I was still in the classroom when all the staff ran in. So they told everybody to exit the classroom and everybody needed to get out of the classroom because they needed to give her some privacy and examine her. So we were all standing outside of my classroom and it was like 30 kids. The teacher that was next door to us was really close to my teacher. They would always talk in the hallways. They had their lunch periods together, their study periods together, and her door was wide open. Why didn't we go in there and tell her what happened? Honestly, like I said, we were high school students. It was really early. So she came out once she saw all of us standing outside in the hallway and she was like, what's going on? Once we told her that a kid punched the teacher and that she passed out, her face drops and she announced that the teacher was pregnant. Mind you, nobody knew this because she hadn't announced it herself yet. This is when they called the ambulance, like for part 3.
Toxic, but I'm an addict. Came back just to have it. Whatever we do, it comes back to you and hits me just like a mallet. Just for fun, you wanna come round, 'cause since we ended, been on a come down, and you could use a top up dose of me. Nothing to you without trying. We can't say the same, I'll be lying, be lying. I don't wanna play no more games. Yeah, I don't wanna do this, 'cause I'll end up changing.
This is going to be part 4 of the time my whole school went on a manhunt for one student. So now everybody knows that this teacher who is passed out on the floor and is not waking up is pregnant. That's when they decided to call the ambulance. I'm guessing they didn't call the ambulance earlier because they were waiting to see if they could try to get her to wake up. They went ahead and put the whole school on lockdown. Nobody was allowed to leave their class, and me and my classmates went into the teacher's classroom next to us. We were sitting in the classroom for like a couple hours, and throughout these couple of hours, what we were hearing outside of the classroom was complete chaos. There was a bunch of cops, a bunch of cop radios, there was dogs. We heard a bunch of yelling and running, and that's when the announcements go off once again. And that's when they announce that they're looking for that kid and they can't find him anywhere in the school, and they're gonna let the day go back to normal, but if anybody sees him, to report it. At this point, everyone at school already knew what happened because of social media, and once they heard on the announcements that they had permission to look for the kid, lots of kids took that as this is a scavenger hunt. When I say lots of kids, I mean the whole school, like for part 5. This is going to be part 5 of the time our whole school went on a manhunt for one student. So once they announced to report the kid who punched the pregnant teacher in the stomach if we see him throughout the school day, lots of kids took that as find him and bring him to me and started hunting him down. I mean, like, as they should. So anyways, yeah, complete chaos broke out. As soon as that bell rang, child, you would be able to leave school and nobody would notice. Everybody was in the hallways. People were looking under the stairwells. They were checking in the janitor's closet, opening up doors that they shouldn't be opening. And with everybody looking for this kid, we found him pretty fast. We did what the police and police dogs couldn't do. This kid was hiding in the band room under the band instructor's desk. They found him and arrested him on school property. We got word that that teacher did in fact lose her baby, but she was okay and she was alive, but she chose not to work at that school again. But she never came back, and I don't know, I think that kid is still in prison. This is the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Yes, this girl really faked her death. So at the time, I was 5 and my little brother was 3. It started off with my mom saying that she didn't feel well and she couldn't pick me up from school, so the bus would have to take me home. Well, a few months after, she started getting picked up from our house by this black car. She said that car was picking her up because of her so-called doctor's appointments, and she wasn't able to drive herself because she was too sick. Well, one day when this car came to pick her up, she never came home. Me and my little brother were sitting around for a couple days waiting for her to come home, but she never came home, and we were young, so we didn't do anything. Eventually, my aunt came over to our house and told my little brother and I that our mom had passed away and that she was cremated and they kept the ashes. So our aunt started taking care of us. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by that same black car. That's when I started to get suspicious of everything and I decided to check these ashes. When I checked, it was flour. Like for part 2. This is part 2 of the time my mom faked her death so she didn't have to take care of me and my siblings. Like I said, my aunt told me that my mom had died and they cremated her and they let her keep the ashes and that she was going to start taking care of us. Me not knowing how long the cremating process actually took at the time since I was so young, I believed her. Until one day I saw my aunt getting picked up by the same black car that my mom used to get picked up by before she died. That's when I decided to check these supposed ashes and it was actually flour. So one day when my aunt got picked up by this black car, I decided to follow her. I didn't have a car, I was 5 years old, so I had to follow them by walking and hiding behind bushes. I was able to follow them up the street, and once they turned the corner, and there I saw my mom standing on the side of the street. That's when I see the car stop and I see my aunt get out and approach my mother. She tells my mom to give her money for covering for her and taking care of me and my little brother. My mom says she faked her death because my dad wasn't in our lives and she didn't want to take care of us anymore. I'm older now and I cut her off completely and I have full custody of my little brother. I said I'd be sharing more stories of things that happened to me while I was younger that I've kept secret for my entire life and haven't told anybody, so here's another story. Fair warning, this video might be a little triggering. I was really young at the time. I don't exactly remember what age. I was around 8 or 13 years old. Me and my friends were going to this haunted maze and it was around Halloween time. It was one of my friend's parents that was taking us there and it was a group of 5 or 6 of my friends. While me and my friends were going through this maze, we were standing in a line and I was standing in the very back. So while we were walking, I ended up tripping on my shoelace and I fell to the side where there was curtains. It was the curtains where the workers would pop out and try to scare you. When I fell, I tried to yell for my friends, but because of the sound effects of the maze, they couldn't hear me. And by the time I got up, they were gone. So I started walking and I eventually got to a place where you could only go right or left, and I went left. And once I went left, I ended up in a circular room where there was 5 passageways. But there was also a group of teenage boys and I didn't even see them at first. All I know is I turned around and got grabbed, like for part 2. This is part 2 of the time I got lost in a haunted maze. Like I said, I lost track of my friends and I was looking for my friends and I ended up in a part of the maze where there was all these guys that I didn't even see at first. All I know is I turned around and I got grabbed. So I screamed. I was super young at the time. I was defenseless. I didn't know what to do. Those guys seemed like they were around their teenage years and they were laughing and making a joke out of it. One of them was laughing and they told their friend, grab her legs. And so the friend grabbed my legs and they were tugging me and pulling me. And then they started to pull my pants down. Panic was filling over my body. I couldn't even scream. When you're young, you'd always think you know what to do at these moments, but you really don't. You just freeze up. And that's exactly what I did. I just froze up. But thankfully, as soon as I felt my pants starting to get pulled down, another group of people turned the corner, and that's when the boys dropped me and ran, like for part 3. This is going to be part 3 of the time I got lost in a haunted maze. Like I said, another group of people started to turn the corner. That's when the boys dropped me and they ran. Those group of people didn't really get to see what was going on. So they asked me if I was okay. I told them that I was good. Me being super young and scared, I didn't really want to tell them what happened. My parents were also really iffy about me going out and I didn't want there to be a situation that would make them not trust me anymore. So they started to walk me out of the maze, you guys. And I'm guessing we were nearing towards the exit. But as we were nearing towards the exit, I completely forgot about the boys. I had realized that I didn't have a bracelet that I was wearing. Me being young and trying not to annoy the people that found me and were helping me get out of the maze, I wanted to turn around, but I didn't want to tell them that I needed to turn around because I lost something. So I ran back. As I was running back trying to find this bracelet in this maze, I had ran into the same group of teenage boys who assaulted me. Like for part 4. This is going to be part 4 of the time I got lost in a haunted maze. I had lost something in the maze, and once I ran back to find it, I had ran into the same group of teenage boys who assaulted me. Like I said previously, I had completely forgotten about these boys. How did I forget about these boys? I'm not sure. I was very young, very dumb, and I wish I wasn't scared at the time to tell those people who were walking me out of the maze that I had lost something, because I'm sure they would have been nice enough to help me find it. But I was scared. I didn't want to annoy them. So as soon as I saw those boys, I was thinking life or death. Why was I thinking life or death? I'm not sure, but that was my instinct. So I took it upon myself to do the dash, and I ran and ran and ran, and I did not look back. I didn't remember which way to go out of the maze, but I somehow did make it out. Thankfully, the Lord was really watching over me that day. And once I got out, I was screaming for my friends. I was screaming their names. I was looking for them everywhere. Eventually, I found my friends, and I just hugged one of them and started bawling.